I'm Julie Bulitt. I've been a family therapist for over 30 years.
I'm David Bulitt. I've been a divorce and family lawyer for more than 35 years.
Together, we have been married for more than 37 years.
In our professional practices, the two of us have been witnesses to individuals and families struggling with life's most difficult challenges. In this podcast, we will talk about the conversations we have had,
The conversations we should have had.
and those that every relationship needs to have in order to find success, happiness, and fulfillment.
This is Conversations for Couples.
The podcast. We are back on Conversations for Couples, the podcast. Now, it's interesting. We've been married for 38 years, Julie and me, and we like to think we have some important things to tell people after 38 years. So, but today we have a couple on who's been married for a year and together for 5. One might think, what do they have to offer that those of us who are on the outside listening can learn? And the fact of the matter is, I think what you're going to find out is that we can all learn a lot from these two folks. They are awesome. Their names are Max and Mariana. Welcome aboard, you two. We're happy to have you.
We're happy to be here.
Thank you for
Awesome.
having us.
So let's first just give everyone a little bit of background. We'll start with Mariana first. Tell everyone about you, where you grew up, and so forth.
So I am originally from Mexico City. I was born there. I lived there for 14 years. And then at 14, my parents were like, we're not staying here anymore. Everything that you knew as life, forget that. We're moving to San Diego. And I lived here for 7 years. High school, I went to community college. And then that's when I was like, I didn't really fit in here. I didn't feel like this was home. And I was trying to build something for myself. I wanted to live. I wanted experiences. And so I went to Israel to complete my BA in psychology. That's where I met Max. And after that, instead, it was COVID. So really hard to
break into the job market. We
Yeah.
graduated. We finished our
Yeah.
BA in
the
Yeah.
height of
Yeah.
lockdown.
So I did some things that I was interested in, but nothing that I pursued as a career. And then after 2 years of graduating, I decided to go into the health and wellness industry. And I got a certification as a health and wellness coach, which is
Awesome.
what I currently do. And now we moved back to San Diego and we're in Carlsbad.
And so you met Max in Israel. Max, a Philly boy, right?
Yes, originally
Okay.
from, I guess, the suburbs of Philadelphia, but I tell people.
Well, we'll still call you a Philly boy because I have a lot of friends from the suburbs of Philadelphia. They like to say that they're Philly boys too, so we'll go with that. So tell everyone a little bit about yourself, how you moved, how you got from Philadelphia to Israel, what you did when you were in Israel,
Yeah,
and then what the two of you are doing together now.
of course. So I guess to make a very long story short is I ended up in Israel. I grew up in a house, suburbs of Philadelphia, very connected to Israel. My dad's originally from South Africa. My mom's from Philadelphia, and they met over there in the 80s. So I always grew up with a strong connection to Israel. After high school in 2012, decided to take a gap year, defer from college in the States, went and lived in Israel for a year. And it was a year of deciding, am I going to stay? Am I going to go back and go to school? Decided to stay and joined the military over there and served as a paratrooper for 2.5 years, and then continued on to live. And that was when I went to school after my military service, studied psychology and met Mariana. But it was a long pull of, I grew up very typical Jewish teenager life in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So Jewish private school, Jewish camp, family trips to Israel. And I kind of reached a point where I was like, either I'm buying what I'm being sold or it's not for me, and that's okay, but let's decide which route I'm going to go. And yeah, so I lived there from 2012 to 2023 when we moved back.
So did you buy it or
I did
not?
buy it. I did buy it.
Okay.
Even though we left, it has a very strong place in our hearts. It was home for me for many years.
Yeah.
Home for Mariana for about 6
years.
almost 6 full years. And a big part of us is still over there, even though we live here. And but that was really where I really grew up, and my whole the beginning of my adult life. I just turned 30, so from 18 to 28 was was in Israel, and that's where I studied. I started my career. I really developed adult relationships and got into everything.
Including the one that you're in right now.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I wanted to ask you, Max, are there any similarities to being a paratrooper and being in a relationship?
And being in a relationship, I think,
Yeah.
interesting question. No one's ever asked me that. I think a very basic thing that you learn in the military is this idea of commitment to something, and then this idea that you commit to something big, and then therefore you have to commit to all the little things that are involved in doing that big thing. So I guess that concept of like when you're in a relationship, like you have this nice idea of a relationship, but a relationship's a lot of little things, a lot of nitty gritty, a lot of day-to-day life. And it's not just what everybody sees. It's not, when you go
You
home.
two have spent a fair amount of time since you got together in 2019. You've spent a fair amount of time apart, right?
Yeah.
So tell us
Yeah,
about
tell
that.
us about that.
You can start.
Okay, so it started, I guess we were together in Israel, and Mariana never planned on living there. She planned on going there for school, and I was living there. And so we reached this crossroads in our relationship of, okay, we know we want to be together. And in theory, we want to get married and we want to create a life together. But there are some big decisions that we're not 100% clear if we see eye to eye on.
And I think this is a clear example of you need a lot more than love to be in a long-lasting relationship. And that was like the first time that we experienced that. Because we loved each other, that wasn't enough.
Yeah. We weren't.
So what happened?
Sure.
Who left?
I left.
Okay, and where did you go?
I went back to Mexico City.
Okay.
I guess the context very quickly. She went to Mexico City to visit her family. I was going to the East Coast to visit my family, and the plan was she was going to fly from Mexico to come see me and my family, and then we'd go back to Israel together. And I land in Newark, and I'm going to see my family in Vermont. And so I rent a car. I'm in the car on the way up to see my family. First phone call I make when I land is to call Mariana, see how she's doing. I made it, long flight, and she says, "I'm not sure I want to come back to Israel." And I'm like, "Oh, Houston, we have a problem." And that was it. And then I basically was like, "Okay, if you're not going to come back, like, don't come see me and my family."
Right.
Stayed in Mexico for 2 months, 2.5, 3.
Yeah.
And then Mariana, did you go back to Israel at some point?
Yeah, I think I got really confused. It was a crazy time for the world. It was still COVID was going on. Israel itself was very closed off. So I spent a lot of time apart from my family without being able to see them. So the first time that I saw them was that trip, and after like a year and a bit. And I was like, oh my God, I want more of this that I don't get in Israel. But I was also confused in my personal life. So everything was kind of like a big mess.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make sense of it in Israel. But once I was in Mexico and had that distance from Israel, I was able to understand that the problem wasn't Israel. I actually love Israel. I actually want to be there. The problem is the things that, or not the problem, just a natural part of life, need to figure out my path. And wherever I go, wherever I am, I'm going to need to do that. So...
Yeah, I think that was I just want to say one thing. That was when we really realized in our relationship for the first time, like on our own skin, that a lot of issues are not necessarily a result of the relationship. It's like you have two people, especially a young couple. And I'm sure there's other stages in life that you go through it. Like when you're trying to figure things out interpersonally or within yourself and you're having a hard time, it very easily can transcend to relationship issues.
Absolutely. And it's funny that we're talking about this because David and I had a talk this morning about sort of, goals in our relationship, which we do a lot, but we had a kind of a serious talk where I was talking about what I wanted, the future to look like. And I wanted more calm and more just like order in our lives. And we have 2 dogs and David wants to do some traveling in an RV. We've talked about that before. And I said to him, I just don't know if that aligns with my goals of wanting things to be, more peaceful. And he said, well, my goals are to kind of see more of the country and enjoy the time while I can still do it. So we're right now at, 38 years later, coming into what you're talking about, which is it's not the relationship. I love him. I want to be with him and he feels the same way, but I have some different goals than he has. And how do we merge them? That is the question, right? And you guys have had to already in your, relationship deal with that. And it sounds like you're still sorting those things out. And I'll tell you that you probably will always be sorting those
That's
out.
the bad news is fast forward another 37 years and you'll still be doing the same thing.
Yeah, but you're getting good practice. So that's good. That's good.
So Max, you got a master's degree, right? In sports and exercise, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, in sport and exercise psychology.
Okay.
Okay, nice.
And you now work with who?
I work with a company called Purple Patch Fitness. They're based out of San Francisco, but I work remote and we work with people all over the globe. And long story short is we help time-starved athletes. So you guys, in my mind, are athletes. Let's say you had a goal that you wanted to achieve, integrate sport into your life so that accomplishing your goals is something that's empowering, but not something that takes over your life and detracts from your business or your relationship and all the other things you want to do, but in fact is something that supports it. So my job is to do the coaching of the actual sport, but also the schedule optimization and time management and helping people.
Love that.
So that was the bridge to get me to some of what I really want to talk to, and that's the work that the two of you are doing together online, on Instagram, and so forth, in terms of your fitness routines and how you incorporate fitness into your relationship.
Yeah. So I guess that started going back to like figuring things out together. It started with, okay, it's hard to have goals that align as a couple, because if you each pursue your own life, then where's the overlap? If I have my career and you have your career, like where's the time that's left over to really live life together? So we had this idea of maybe we would work together. And then the opposite happened where it's like, well, then maybe are we now too enmeshed because and so we're kind of in this weird place of we want to work together, but it has its challenges. We don't want to work together. That has its challenges. So right now it's currently, we put our couples coaching business on the side. We're each pursuing our own careers independently, but we have Instagram and we have this way of living, which is really using healthy habits and a healthy lifestyle as a foundation to support us as individuals and ultimately as a couple. And that's what we make a lot of content about, and is really how we live our day to day.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time looking at your account, and I watch your stuff when it goes up. And what struck me with some of what you guys are doing is how a lot of your philosophy can be applied to your relationship, to our relationship, to anyone's relationship. So I'm going to read a couple of quotes from a couple of posts over the next several minutes. I want to talk to you about that. Max, you do a lot of running. A lot of talking while you're running.
So does Mariana. She also runs.
Okay, so
I'm the big recorder when we run.
Okay. So you in one of the posts you said, learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, which I know you were talking about fitness at the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but let's talk a little bit about how. Have you thought about how that applies at all to your relationship with Mariana?
Yeah. I mean, I'll start.
Oh, we've had a lot of moments.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think one of the biggest things in general, it's learning how to have hard conversations, learning that being in a relationship is not always comfortable. It's not always easy, and not shying away from, on a very basic level, it's not shying away from discomfort in your life, in anything, whether it's personal, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your relationship, and realizing that where there is discomfort, that's probably where the most opportunity for growth is.
Right.
Obviously that's easier said than done. I think one easy example that I think about is something that I struggled a lot with in the beginning of our relationship is when I would upset her, I then oddly had a hard time. Instead of being focused on how can I make it better, I started to have a hard time with myself, starting to be frustrated with myself that I upset her. And so the discomfort of being in a hard place as a couple, learning how to be okay, we don't need to panic. It doesn't need to turn into a huge fight.
Right.
But we also don't need to pretend like everything's okay. We can have a few hours. We can have a weekend. We can have a night where there's a little bit of something's off. Yeah, friction.
Yeah. And I think that's what you're talking about, which is embracing the suck, right? Like embracing the moments that feel like yuck. This does not feel good. but being confident and secure enough, and there's lots of discussions about secure attachment. I'm sure that you've heard, about attachment styles, but having a secure base, a secure attachment allows you to be uncomfortable, have some conflict, say some hard things, feel bad, have your partner feel bad, but know in the end that you're going to be okay. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
I mean,
something
that is uncomfortable. Those discussions are uncomfortable. I'm sure that phone call that you got when you landed after coming from overseas, that was not particularly a comfortable phone call for you to make, Mariana, or for you to listen to.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't comfortable to say it, but I'm sure it wasn't also comfortable for you to hear.
Yeah.
But I think, growth is outside of your comfort zone. So if the goal is to be together with someone for the rest of your life, at least that's how we see our relationship, then you need to grow. And how do you grow? By stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So you focus on being healthy physically, right? Because and that's part of what you promote. But how does that blend or bleed into the being healthy emotionally and mentally for the two of you?
How does that blend?
I think, interestingly enough, one thing we talk a lot about with mental health, I think we talked about this the other day. I mean, if we showed you a picture, like a screen of a pan of our apartment, we don't have a TV. And so I think one of the interesting things about a healthy lifestyle is it doesn't do the work for you for the mental health and the emotional connection, but it creates an environment where there's less distraction and it's easier to connect emotionally as a couple and be in a safe space together to work through the ins and outs of life. So your days just look very different. Like if I go for a run, Mariana goes for a run, even if we're not together, but we come home and we enter the house roughly plus minus at the same time. Let's say it's in the evening, and instead of sitting down in front of the TV to watch a show together, we have dinner. And even if we don't have a lot to talk about, we've like made some food. It doesn't have to be a fancy dinner, but we're sitting down at the table. These little healthy habits that you connect the cooking to nutrition, you connect the fitness to exercise. But if you strip those benefits away, it just creates a very stable environment, I think.
What do you do? Because I think a lot of people are struggling, and you guys are, much younger. And I think that this is a great question. How do you deal with technology in your relationship? Because that's such a distraction.
Well, I think first of all, we don't have a TV, so that takes care of that. And then we do have our phones. We spend a lot of time on our phones for work. And I think genuinely when we're done with work, we don't want to be on them. We want to connect.
So we don't have them at the dinner table.
And we don't have we don't have them at
Okay, that's
but
a great
it's a learning
rule.
struggle. I think for me, something I've learned is sometimes like we've had arguments, we've had fights where like I'll tell Mariana to get off her phone.
Right.
And she's like, stop bossing me around.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, what I really probably needed to say is like, hey, it's been a long day. I would like some attention. But that's really hard to say.
Yes.
So like if I can learn to say that, that would be more helpful, because it's not I don't care that she's on her phone. It's just like I want her attention. And
or it's even, you also mentioned before, like, or it's even me saying like, hey, I'm just gonna sit on my phone for like 20 minutes. I want to like heads up. I'm doing that. So
right. And then when I'm done in 20 minutes, I'm gonna, come sit with you and we can talk about like your day or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point, Max, which is like and we always say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Right. And really phrasing things in a positive way. And I have a funny story. David doesn't even know this. He's going to be like a little slightly annoyed.
Remember I told you there was no scripts.
Yeah. So our granddaughter, who's 4, slept over last night. And when David he goes to the bathroom in the middle of the night, he doesn't flush the toilet, which is fine because we don't want to wake each other
Only
up.
with number one.
Yeah, only number one. Okay, so because we don't want to wake each other up, so I don't flush either. So if we go pee, we don't flush till the morning. Okay, so my granddaughter gets up and she goes, Peeps didn't flush the toilet. And I said, yeah, because it was nighttime and he didn't want to wake, us up and whatever. And she goes, I need to tell him he needs to flush the toilet. And I said, okay. I said, well, let's talk about how you're going to say it. And I said, do you think you should say, Peeps, you didn't flush the toilet. You're not good and you need to do it next time. And she looked at me and she kind of like looked, and I said, or how would it be if you said, hey, Peeps, when I got up this morning, I noticed that the toilet wasn't flushed. Could you try to flush the toilet?
You expect her to say
So wait a minute. And I said to her, I said, which one do you think would work better? And she goes, the nice way. But it was really like teaching her like the difference between saying something to somebody. And I think that the more opportunities that we all have to kind of like pick our script, right? Like, is it going to be this or it's going to be that, but how we deliver it. And I love that concept of really thinking things through. And how
now that you've told everybody about
the
habit that we didn't really need to the airwaves.
It's fine.
I'm trying to remember which one of you talked about this, but in one of your videos, the basic message was that sometimes you don't feel like exercise. You don't feel like doing it, but you do it anyway. And ultimately your brain sort of catches up with your body. And again, I'm thinking of these things in the scope of your relationship. I mean, there's got to be times, and Mariana, you just mentioned a little bit about, being on your phone and so forth. There's got to be times when you say to yourself, I don't really want to do this right now, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then you sort of catch up. Do you see any of that in the relationship between the two of you?
She's laughing.
You can tell the truth.
Yeah. I think we do see that. And I think something that's important the same way that I think we do it with fitness in a relationship is having your goal, like your overall goal clear, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
if you know the goal isn't to go socialize with this person, like that's not the goal. The goal is that you are with someone who has a connection to this person for whatever reason. And for them, it's important to have this situation happen. But the goal of your partner is to have a good relationship with, that doesn't make sense, like with me. So you will support what I want to do because the goal is that we both feel like our buckets are being filled. And this is part of filling my bucket. So you're not focused on the situation itself. You're focused on what purpose is this situation showing up to the situation serving.
Yeah, like me agreeing to go RVing with him. It's not my desire to go RVing, but it's his on his bucket list, and I'm doing it for him.
I don't even want her to go at this point. I'm going to take the dogs, and I'm going to be somewhere in Minnesota by the time December hits.
Yeah, he might be out to California to visit
maybe
you guys.
Montana, and she can come fly and stay in Jackson Hole, and we'll visit.
I think the interesting thing is like, if you're going back to that question, is like if your life's made up of it's your day-to-day is made up of the things you do. Your life's made up of like the small things, the bigger things that you do. So it's like you don't always want to work out, but it's important. It's objective. We believe, our belief is fitness, health is objectively good for you. The research shows it. Like it's good for you physically, it's good for you mentally, it's good for you emotionally, it's good for your health. And now, like day to day, it's also really good for your longevity and your overall long-term health. So like even when you don't want to do it, you need to do it. Just like you probably don't want to go to work every day. You go to work every day. Because you need to go to work. And adopting that mindset to like other things that we want to do as a couple. For example, we're a young couple. We're trying to budget and save money and figure out like some, create more financial stability. And it's like, we don't want to cook. We want to go out to dinner. But one of us has to tell the other person like, no, we want this thing long-term. So let's make this decision now. And so just having that dynamic in a relationship where you can hold each other accountable, even for your own goals, even if it's like, if I don't want to do if I'm feeling kind of lazy and don't want to like do the extra work that I need to do for my job, she could say to me, but like, you really want to, like, you need to do it, not because I'm bossing you around, because like, that these are the other things that you want. So that dynamic of accountability, I think, is something that fitness has really taught us in our relationship.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of a relationship, is the built-in accountability partner. But there also has to be trust and grace in the process of that happening. And when there's not, it feels like a nag or it feels like a boss around, and not like a little nudge, like, hey, you said you wanted to work out today. It's, 2:00 and you still haven't gotten off the couch. Are you, doing that? Right. And, but I love the idea of you guys working together and holding each other accountable in the exercise arena. But it also sounds like you do that in lots of arenas, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say is sort of the biggest challenge that that you guys have faced or are facing right now as a young couple married, about a year?
Biggest challenge.
I think maybe it's not the biggest challenge. We're talking about careers, like how you support each other when you're in different places. It's probably more applicable to most people.
Yeah.
Kind of this, like, we were at a crossroads where, again, like, you have life together, but you also have your lives individually, and someone may be feeling a little more fulfilled in their relationships with their friends than the other partner, or someone may be having a better hard time, maybe having a little more success in their career at the moment than the other partner, and kind of how do you
support and be genuinely happy for your partner when you feel like you're lacking.
Yeah, that's a good one. And you're also talking about balance, which is a really big issue that a lot of couples fight through all the time, is how do you be yourself and also be together as a couple, and what does it look like the individual time? So that's awesome.
Again, I keep going back to some of I'm proving to you that I look at a lot of your content, but Mariana, you did a post some time ago where you talked about the importance of having your own separate time, and that it wasn't intended to mean to Max that you didn't love him or didn't want to be with him, but that part of your life you still needed to have to some degree. Yeah. We talk a lot about, the sports analogy, right, is that there's no I in team, right? And so from our perspective, there is an I in we, even though it's not spelled that way, that for us, we have found the same thing. So what do you do? What do you guys do when you need your own time apart? How do you manage that?
I think in this period of time, it's been really fitness. Like, we're not really working out together. And I would say, like, that's where we're finding that one-on-one time.
You read more. So you're doing some things to carve out time, like, to yourself. Like, cause it's...
Yeah, like in the morning we wake up and kind of like everyone has their own morning. I like to read. I like to go on walks. I like to journal. I like to create an environment. I'm sorry. Max has a very dominating personality. And when I am trying to figure something out, I tend to get carried away with his perspective and think that's how I think, or that's how I feel, and that's what I want. And so I need to make sure that I create that space so that I don't just adopt whatever it is that.
Yeah. And that's a challenge. That's a great thing for you to, again, see, sort of in your first year of marriage, that you have to do that. And that's what sort of brought me to have that discussion with David this morning, which is like, yes, your goal is to go RVing with 2 dogs and like go out and see the United States. But I'm not sure that that's really what I want. And I had to reflect, because I do get excited for him about what he wants. Right. And, but, teasing out how you're going to do that, right? Like when it's someone else's perspective and not yours. But anyway, you guys are amazing.
Yeah. We want to thank you so much.
And we love what you're doing separately. We love what you're doing together. If people want to find you, what's the best place to find you?
Our social media account, live with M_M. That's great. Probably the best place to find us.
Yeah, okay. We'll include it in the show notes so people can just click on the link and reach out. And we're really interested to see what happens in year 2 and year 10. If we're still
going to we're going to have you back and keep in touch with you. But we are the Bullits. We can be found on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube at the Bullits, TheBullitts. We also have a website, thebullits.com. And anything else we need
I
to
think
say?
You've covered all the platforms.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for being on. This was great. And I know folks out there, again, we talk a lot about relationships lasting a long time. And these folks talk about how you build that relationship so it does last a long time. So I urge you to go on. If you have an Instagram page, go on, follow them. Pay attention to what they tell you, because there's a lot of gems in there. So Thanks again, you two. We much appreciate it.
Thank you. We loved being on. Hopefully we can do it again. There's lots to talk
Yeah,
about.
we'd love to have you back.
And we'll see you next time, folks. This is Conversations for Couples,
The podcast.
Julie Bulitt is a professionally licensed clinical social worker and family therapist. David Bulitt is a divorce and family lawyer. Julie is not your therapist, and David is not your lawyer. This podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only.